Good evening, everyone. I'm Akush Lapinder. It's good having you back with us. A tour bus crash leaves several seriously wounded in Eleuthera. The details still sketchy at this point, but we can tell you that the vehicle was an Eleuthera Adventure Tour bus that was in Rock Sound after 10 this morning when the accident occurred. Here's what Attorney General Carl Bethel shared with senators.
There have been some casualties, as yet no deaths, but there have been casualties. The U.S. Coast Guard, first of all, the Minister of Health and the Minister of National Security have jointly with the consent, of course, of the higher-ups, the Prime Minister initiated the National Disaster Plan. So all resources are being allocated to swiftly send air ambulances to South Eleuthera to bring the injured persons who may need hospitalized care to New Providence. The United States Coast Guard has landed several helicopters at Odyssey and is prepared to do what they have to do for their citizens who may require more complex interventions.
We can tell you that since then, 5 of the reported 11 passengers were airlifted to medical facilities both here in New Providence and South Florida. 2 on board the bus were said to be Bahamians. 5 ambulances were deployed to the Lynden Pinley International Airport to receive the injured. There's now an urgent call for blood donations. Those donations can be made at the Princess Margaret and Doctors Hospital blood banks. This, of course, a developing story that will continue to follow for you. In other news this evening, the promise was that there would be no load shedding this summer, but in the face of weeks of blistering heat, New Providence residents have had to contend with just that, and in some instances for more than 3 hours at a time. Well, in this report, our BJ McDermott tells us what was behind the blackouts, how long they'll continue, and what's the next step?
Bahamas Power and Light Chairman Donovan Moxey making another promise to BPL, relief from ongoing power cuts to come by the end of the week. But until then, those outages will continue in 3 to 4 hour intervals. That is until $2 million rental generators come on stream.
In order to address the generation issues that trouble us over this weekend, we would like to report that relief is expected in short order. This is in the form of the rental units from Agreco, the first bank of which we expect to be installed by Wednesday of this week, with a second bank of Agreco units generation due to be installed by the weekend. These rental generation assets will relieve the pressure on our system immediately, and together with machines that are being repaired and brought back into service, will give us some breathing room as far as the load is concerned. It must be said, however, that even with these generators, the possibility of load shedding remains until we have completed the new 132 megawatt power plant under construction in Station A at the Clifton Pier Power Station.
Now, if you're wondering what was behind this weekend's increased load shedding, BPL's acting COO Ian Pratt says increasing customer demand due to high temperatures coupled with generation outages brought about the situation.
Last week, however, additional units at the Blue Hills plant developed problems, which resulted in them coming offline and setting up the present generation shortfall. Over the weekend, 1 unit at Clifton Pier also tripped offline due to a mechanical defect. This was repaired and that unit has been returned to service. 2 units at the Blue Hills Power Station tripped offline. One of those fed into our steam turbine, which takes the heat energy from the exhaust system of one of those generators to produce power. When that engine came offline, the steam turbine also came offline, resulting in the situation being exacerbated.
As for a load shedding schedule, BPL won't be releasing one in the face of concerns about crime spiking once it's known when certain areas will be without power. When asked if BPL will offer any incentives to customers following the constant power outages, its chairman said this.
It would be nice to do that, but as a utility, see, it's not like we are, and I don't want to bring up any of the utilities. Say you're a television utility, and people pay you a flat rate to provide services. You lose 1 or 2 channels, the service doesn't quite work. Well, guess what? It's not a pay-as-you-go service. And so they try to give you something in return for that. When you look at a utility like BPL, it's really pay-as-you-go or pay for what you use. And so from our perspective, if you're utilizing the electricity that we've delivered to you, then we expect to be paid for it. And that's really the fair thing here.
Reporting for JCN News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Leader of government business in the Senate, Attorney General Carl Bethel, acknowledging serious gaps in the law as it relates to anti-terrorism initiatives, particularly money laundering. Mr. Bethel, who was leading off debate on the 2019-2020 budget in the upper chamber this morning, recently returned home from attending a Financial Action Task Force plenary session in Orlando, Florida. The Bahamas was credited with taking steps to improve efforts to combat money laundering and financial terrorism. It was, however, encouraged to work on implementing its action plan to address its strategic deficiencies. Mr. Bethel also used his contribution to send a warning to those in the gaming industry who may seek to evade paying the necessary taxes.
And anyone who wants to make a cottage industry from lawsuits challenging the laws that we will pass to reflect the agreement we have with the major gaming houses, which are going to pass in July, anyone who wants to have go start a lawsuit, pay your tax. That's what the law says. Pay your tax. When we have a settled law, you can sue all you want. Just pay your tax, and if the courts say we owe you something, we'll settle it up after. The law, I'm not threatening it, the law requires, where there's a settled tax law, that if anybody wishes to challenge it, they must pay their tax pending. That is in the law. That is the law of the Bahamas.
Meantime, F&M Senator Dr. Mildred Hall Watson, using her contribution to publicly scold her parliamentary colleague Frederick McAlpine for attempting, she said, to embarrass the government. 2 weeks ago, the Pine Ridge MP criticized the Minnis administration, claiming that seemingly some of its members have lost the people's touch, taste, look, and feel, adding that since voting against the 60% increase in value-added tax last year, he hasn't been invited to one parliamentary caucus in Grand Bahama. Well, Dr. Watson insists the outspoken MP has isolated himself and has deceived his constituents.
Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives, once said, "Diversity is your strength, but unity is your power." We will not allow our power to be diluted by others for their own personal ambitions. It is the people's time, and in time, the people of Pine Ridge will deal with it.
A rising cost of living, unabated violent crime, and a decreasing middle class all contributing to a high misery index here in the Bahamas. The view of Global United Fellowship presiding Bishop Neil C. Ellis, who says he'd decrease taxes, reasoning that a lot of Bahamians are not trying to evade them, but simply can't afford to pay up.
The truth of the matter is, from figures I see, in some cases, if businesses pay all their taxes, they go out of business. All right. Now, I believe and my mother, God bless and rest her soul, these were some wise people in Family Islands, man. My mother used to say all the time, sometimes it's better to get plenty of a little than to get a little of plenty.
Now, while Bishop Ellis credits the government for removing taxes on a number of goods, he nonetheless expressed concern that all the real decision-making takes place around the cabinet table.
You have to incorporate people from different spheres of life and different areas of our country to say, all right, where is our people feeling the pain most? Yeah. So it seemed to me like the government was taking in more when VAT was 7.5.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the truth of the matter is, when they increased it to 12, the Minister of Finance just reported they didn't meet the expected intake.
And a shortfall of $240 million.
That's a heck of a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You got a shortage of almost $300 million.
To the bishop, that doesn't make sense. He made it clear, though, that he's not trying to suggest the government's wrong for imposing hefty taxes, but if one isn't receiving the anticipated results, it must reevaluate. Bishop Ellis was a guest on Love 97's weekly talk show, Jones & Company. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.